Well, one of
Did
my...
I say publicly that I love you?
I want my cocaine.
You've always say it again. My cocaine. My cocaine said to me to tell you that he loves you and I love you. We both love you. Okay.
Sit down.
Even the older Michael Caine loves you.
Kills me. So my job here as co-chair is really just to introduce Tony Broadbent every time. He's going to do the Marilyn Wallace Memorial Lecture. Have you ever met her? Do you remember her? Marilyn Wallace, who I spoke about before, was a big mover and shaker with Sisters in Crime, Mystery Writers of America, our local. I knew her through that, and she encouraged me to come here. And that's okay, it's just mine.
It's the Beatles!
And,
Did you time that? Did you undo that, your husband?
yeah. So we know who won the Tour de France. And that was the reason I came here and walked through those doors 22
Oh, no,
years
sorry.
ago.
Cara's got a brand new bag. Oh, no. It's new or newly minted. Oh, I don't know.
Marilyn, was amazing because she and Judy Grieber, Jillian Roberts came up with this brainchild of this conference, cooked it up with Elaine, and you know all that. But Jackie and Sheldon carried on the tradition, and David and I have tried to just carry on what Marilyn and Judy started, to carry on Marilyn's spirit. And I think the best thing we can do for her is to just keep this conference the way she envisioned it, collegial, helping, sharing. Because the feeling of welcome I got when I walked in made me, an amateur feel like, hey, maybe I could, actually write something, So that's what all I want to say. And I want to just thank two people who never get thanked in the conference. We know that Catherine and Karen do an amazing job, and Elaine. But this man, Dana, he's kind of the glue around here. And he's always behind the scenes. And Sam Barry. Is Mr. Barry around?
I don't know if he is, but you can give him a hand. You can always give him a hand.
All right, so without further ado, you just want to hear Tony. But please remember, Marilyn as Tony speaks. Thank you. Yeah, go.
I'm trying to remember Marilyn's voice. Excuse me while I shuffle the impedimenta around this stage, just for a moment. And I learned this, is that, take a moment. One of my tutors once told me to slow down to speed up. And so that indeed is what I'm going to do. Fear no more the heat of the sun. No, that's wrong. It should be, fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. Thee thy worldly task has done, home art gone and ta'en thy wages. Golden lads and girls almost, as chimney sweepers come to dust. That's from William Shakespeare's Cymbeline, a not oft-produced play, but no less glorious for all that. And no less glorious that I opened up a local Marin paper just a couple of days ago and found that the Marin Shakespeare Company has had the wit and intelligence to put it on. Cymbeline. That's, it's a song of lament by, if I remember rightly, Gadirius, his brothers Gadirius and Arivagos, who believe their sister Imogen to have been killed. In the very first book that I wrote, which is called The Smoke, the character Jethro, the cat burglar, mutters and murmurs those words to himself, almost in a drunken stupor, as in grief he laments a lady friend that has been murdered. And at the passing of Marilyn Wallace, I felt I could do no less. And if I could find my notes, which I seem to have completely lost. Oh, there you are. I read that song of lament here at this very lectern for Marilyn's memorial celebration wake that we had here. It was standing room only. Many of her past students were here because she was a woman of rare talent, and in honor of her and her partner here, two wonderful authors, Judy Grieber, Marilyn Wallace, two ladies of huge talent and generosity, authors themselves, but also teachers of extraordinary passion. There wasn't a thing they wouldn't do to help young would-be authors. And it was in they were my two first teachers, but of both of them, Marilyn was the first. And like so many, I elected to go to a pre-conference lesson over there in the other, what do they call it, Dana, these days? It was the far room, isn't it? Where they
the meeting room, or the gallery. Yeah.
Well, it was then it was. I think they have the hospice books there now.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And it was in that room. It was my very clever wife who said, you know, if you want to write, you should go to that Mystery Writers Conference. She said it in her voice, not mine. And I said, do you think so? You know, we can't really afford it. We've got the cat to feed. And she said, no, go on. It'll do you good. I went in there, and it opened the door to riches of untold wealth, because not only did I get to meet Marilyn, but there I met a fellow author, a wonderful author called Kirk Russell, who has indeed become one of the great friends of my life. Again, generous with his wit and his time beyond measure. But you never know which door will open. When Cara introduced everybody to the conference just a couple of days ago, she said, I remember walking through that door, and here I am, 16 novels later. And that's the true magic here. It's not for anybody to impress or suppress your talent. Everybody here wants to work as a catalyst towards that. And I applaud them all, and do. And that's why year after year, having come here twice as a student, I've returned with great gratitude as a member of the faculty. But Marilyn was my first teacher. And what I remember to this day is that she read out students' work, a little piece of a page or two, and then commented on it, but with no attribution, no name. And there was one which talked about, and I remember to this day, an event that occurred in a local coffee shop that left blood on the cakes. And I went, whoa, whoa, I still remember it, you know, chills. And I looked around, and there were, shall I say, people now of my age and persuasion, ladies with the light blue rinse in their hair, gentlemen of a certain age, and there was this mean-looking character, lean, as if he'd walked off the set of a television movie, and I thought, it's got to be him. Blood on the cakes, it's got to be him. And indeed it was. So I thought, okay, steal from the best. So as he got up to leave, I thought, right in there, you know. So I took my non-eaten sandwich and a bottle of beer that I still had, because they served beer or something. And I followed him out, and I was just about to leave the room, and he too. And Marilyn called us both back. I don't know what she said, don't care what she said to Kirk. But she said to me, you know, that was really very good, you know. You should keep on writing, you really should. I'm not sure if I floated out, or slid out, or whether Kirk had to pick me up off the floor. But a teacher had said, you know, you should carry on writing. Go on, do it. And in so many instances in life, we look for that man or woman to say yes, either to our love, or a work, or a job, or to find a literary agent, or to find a publisher. They're gatekeepers, or they're bastards. It's one of the two. Or they become your best friends. And if you're very, very lucky, they do become and remain your best friends. But they're only gatekeepers, and the ultimate gatekeeper is you. As a teacher once told me, how many times have you told yourself you can't do it and proved yourself to be right? So it's only you that says, it's not yes you can, yes you can. It's yes I can. And yes I damn well will. My first book started because I lost my father, who was a hero. I thought he'd live at least till he was 150, but he died on his 81st birthday. How is that for neatness in the Broadbent family? I was devastated. And I met then, quite by chance, another Londoner here in the Bay Area, and he'd recently lost his father, and the two of us would find grief at the bottom of a bottle. In his case, a bottle of beer, and in my case, a bottle of water. We both drank beer. We had some wonderful lunches in public, and as he began to recount tales of his father, I offered one or two of mine. His father, by perchance, had been a cat burglar and run away from home. England in the 30s was extraordinarily depressed after the, and not just because they couldn't get the Netflix. They were depressed. They were coming out of the Depression in 1926. There were hunger marches. People were out of work. So his father and mine, they just ran away to the army. His ran away to the Navy. My dad ran away to India and joined the British Army there and was there for 10 years. He went into Callow Youth, came out looking like Errol Flynn, playing guitars, tennis, and with a string of polo ponies. That's what the British Army did for you then. And then he went to war and trained commandos. Interesting. So back to Chris's dad, not my Chris, my friend Chris's. His father had been a cat burglar. Mine wasn't. But they both seem to have a very similar morality, which is that family and friend were absolute, and a man lived by his word. And if anybody attacked your friend or your family, you went for them. No questions. You found your own justice. And I said, by God, I wish they'd have had a chance to meet one another. And then I said, by Christ, they will, and I'll write it. And that was the seed for me. So I didn't write it for me because I would go, do you really think I can write a book? No. Do you really think I can write a book? I don't think I can. Next, please. Is that paper or plastic you'd like? Anyway, so I wrote it because my dad stood in the room. I don't know who stands in your room with you, but my dad stood there night after night. Or the presence of him did, and I continued to write. And between him and Marilyn Wallace, and the kindness of strangers that I met here, the kindness of those strangers that became friends, I indeed finished my first novel. And then Mike Connolly read it. And he got me to my first agent, my first publisher. Kindness of strangers. That was really very good. The piece you wrote, you should keep writing, you really should. So who are our teachers? Well, it can be the books you read as a child, the books you read last week. It could be the films you go to see. I mean, how many times did you go and see Star Wars when it first came out? It was George Lucas's wife, who was in a religious group, Rudolf Steiner group actually, that introduced him to the work of The Hero's Journey, which was then brought here by another hugely wonderful and magnificent teacher called Joseph Campbell. And now people write about The Hero's Journey as if it's just you can pull it off a shelf. No, the hero's journey comes from inside, and it comes from being moved. That's what Marilyn Wallace did, that's what Judy Greber did. They moved all the students from what they held inside. What they gave you could never really buy. You can only ever earn by spending the time and grace to listen to it. So the books you read, the films you go to, the pop songs you listen to as a teenager and listen to again and again and again. Extraordinary teachers. In fact, pop songs become those default mechanisms for our emotions. I saw her standing there. Yeah. You know, your boyfriend's back. I'm going to be in trouble. You know, whatever. All of those things, you think it didn't happen to you, but I tell you, that person sitting next to you happened to them. And it was wonderful. Somebody was going, So, if all these things you learn from, you have to learn to steal. I ran and built creative departments and advertising agencies in London and New York and San Francisco. Some big names. And what shocked most of the Americans I came into contact with, who'd been taught by a different system, was that when I said, go out and steal, they looked at me shocked. It was, I don't know what it is, maybe it's they've been in too many covered wagons or something, I don't know. But listen, ooh, careful, you know. Hey, you know, we're different cultures. Hey, steal. Never, ever, ever, ever copy blindly. If you steal, you've got to know what it is you're stealing and why it is you're stealing, and if you get pointed to, fess up and confess it. All the great artists, all the great musicians, all the great composers stole from those that came before them, and did so with a joy. All you've got to do is steal it and make it better. And that's your task. Did you ever, as a child, have one of those books where you joined up the lines and you made pictures? Well, that's called copying. You just join up the lines, join up the dots. Stealing means you've got to go in there with a knife and cut it out. I'll steal from the best. I've stolen from everybody that's ever come to this conference, every author certainly. Don Winslow? Absolutely. Do I have any drug dealers in mind? No. But I tell you what, I steal on every other page. Lee Child's work, David Corbett's probably one of the best stylists out there at the moment. It's just amazing what he's doing with prose. Just extraordinary writer. Steele. Cara, with Amy Leduc, in Paris. All right, I do London, she does Paris, they're not that far apart. She's a girl, I've got a guy. Doesn't matter, steal. Steal. And if I see you again next year and you haven't stolen, beware. So steal, don't copy. Oh, and then steal from yourself. Surprise yourself. Sometimes read aloud to the cat. I've got two very, very attentive cats. And I read to them. Not really. But they stand there patiently going, what's he doing today? I don't know, it's starved again. When's food? I don't know, when he's finished. Steal. Steal from the stories because you poor buggers. This is the real lecture that starts here. Oh, okay. That was just the prologue. I love doing prologues because it drives David. He's not here. Anyway, because it drives him wild. You know, use adverbs. Look, he hates them, and I love them. Why not? They're all in the toolbox. The need for narrative. So I'm going to read a bit. You know, it's been a long week. The need for narrative. This is real stuff I've done here. I actually read it in books. I went to Google land. I ignored the first 5 Googles because they'd been advertised, because I was in advertising, I can recognize those. And then I got to, Marilyn made me laugh a lot. Anyway, the need for narrative is embedded in our brains. Ooh. Telling stories is not just the oldest form of teaching, it's also the highest form of consciousness. And I've written, I know that to be true because I read it in a book. Several of them actually. 1 or 2 of which I may actually quote from as we go on. Or not, as the case may be. It's when Dana says get off that I'll go. Hard facts, and this is something, reams of data. This is what I learned in advertising, where you had to become an instant expert on just about anything very quickly, otherwise you didn't get the business. Hard facts, reams of data, rarely, if ever, engage people enough to move them to action. Although Karen Katona was here, DA, SFDA, lovely, lovely lady, brilliant, sharp as a tack. She said that, once told me that if lawyers will assail a jury with fact after fact after fact after fact after fact, if they don't think they've got a story compelling enough to win their case, they will stun you, bore you to death with facts. Cunning people, those lawyers. First, let's kill all the lawyers. Think of all those times you were given a list of things to do by your mum or dad, or your teacher. And as the list itself quickly fades from mind, because most people can only remember 3 facts at once before they go, when's tea? What stays in the mind is what's to be gained at the end. And that stays with you, the beginning and the end stays with you. There's a great learning there. It's about 2 acts. But anyway, even if it was only that it saved you from a further telling off, And you must excuse me after last night, but this one. A lady called Singer Black used to sing this. You are a mucky kid, mucky as a dustbin lid. And if I tell you what you did, you'll get a belt from your daddy. Lovely, isn't it? That's when corporal punishment was actually administered by parents. We don't do that now. It's not in Marin. And even less so if you haven't got a child. You know, David Corbett's right. You know, I said those nice things about him before. Forget it.
No, you didn't.
Yes, oh, yes, I did.
Yes.
Oh, no, you didn't. Oh, no. Stories, and excuse the pun because I stole this one too, are state-of-the-art technology. It's good, isn't it? You like it? It's yours. I stole it. I give it to you freely, as long as you give it back. They connect us to one another, rather like tuning forks. If told well, stories can be emotionally, get this word, transfigurative. I'm not sure if it's a real word. And the answer in box 2. I know that transfiguration is a word. Transfigurative, well, my spell check had a brain attack trying to do that. But transfigurative implies that the alchemical process is ongoing, and so I prefer that. Creativity is ever ongoing. Perfection is always in continuance. And again, that's another phrase I was given by a tutor of mine. If I call him a guru, you think, I always thought he was weird. But if I say a teacher, you think he had good teachers. Guru, washing on the head, teachers, never mind. Oh, I don't know. I'm enjoying this. I'm knackered today about you. And yet transformative might be a better word. Stories can move people to action because the listener, the reader, can identify with the characters in a narrative so much, to such an extent they are literally, I thought that, I even put this in italics here, literally feel like they've shared the experience. Who knew? Without shared stories, not only would we not likely have survived as a species, we couldn't understand ourselves. And I read that bit about species survival. I didn't think that up. That's way, way above my pay grade. See what I mean about stealing? Species survival. Alliterative. Nice. It's got a regular backbeat there somewhere. But what I did think about when I heard that science of it all explained was something the writer Joan Didion once said. Oh, under David's show I'm going to enjoy this. What's something the writer Joan Didion once famously said. Oh, I love it. It's great. We tell ourselves stories in order to live. Now, you probably thought of that line too. Yes, you did. I know you did. Or the person next to you did, because you're dumb. Never mind. Anyway, it's a perennial favorite on Pinterest. You go to Pinterest and it says, sayings to live by. Wash the cat every other day. Never mind. Anyway, I love Pinterest. When I'm bored with the news, 10 seconds in, I go to Pinterest and get never mind. Christine's going to play hell with me after this. What you may not remember is that wonderful idea or thought came from a collection of essays called The White Album. And yes, dear Alice, the man is talking Beatles again. And cleverly so. No, not dear Alice, not Tony or Paul or whatever his name is, but Joan Didion. Wonderful writer. The title White Album, a collection of journalistic pieces first published in 1970. Sorry, I'll read that again. There's a wind-up screen showing. Christine's got a look of absolute terror on her face, so I know I'm going, poor thing. Have you got the medicine?
Forgot it in the car?
Okay. You know, I was writing this. Anyway, I wrote it, so I've got to be able to say it. The title, White Album, if David stops sniggering, a collection of journalistic pieces first published in 1979. Paid homage, I could have said homage, but I paid homage, because of Cara's here, paid homage, to the eclectic, almost ad hoc nature of the collection of tracks that made up the Beatles LP. No suggested narrative or overarching theme this time, just a seeming randomness of art. a mosaic of thoughts. You know, that must have been the third glass of wine I had last night when I was writing. We tell, now this is her, now you can get the difference between an amateur and this is a professional talking. This is Joan Didion. We tell ourselves stories in order to live. The princess is caged in the consulate, the man with the candy will lead children into the sea. The naked woman on the ledge outside the window on the 16th floor is the victim of a city, or the naked woman is an exhibitionist, and it would be interesting for us to know. She continues. We live entirely, especially if we are writers, by the imposition of a narrative line upon the disparate images, by the ideas which we have learned to freeze, the shifting, and the lovely word now, phantasmagoria, which is our actual experience. At least we do for a while, she says. I'm talking here about a time when I began to doubt the premises of all the stories I had ever told myself. A common condition, I was later told, but one I found very troubling. I was meant to know the plot, but all I knew was what I saw, and this is the thing that took me back to the White Album. Just wonderful. Flash pictures in variable sequence, images with no meaning beyond their temporary arrangement, not a movie, but a cutting room floor experience. And that just stopped me for a couple of days. Wrote it down, went to coffee bars, looked at it, read it, couldn't remember it for the life of me, read it again, had more coffee, then I began to remember it. And that's what some writers do to you sometimes. They hit you with a phrase or a saying or an idea, an understanding or a concept that just pins you, and that's your Pinterest. But then that becomes part of your soul and your DNA. It was that specific quote that first took me to Joan Didion's White Album and her glorious prose. Me, like you, like all of us, facing down the tyranny of yet another blank white page. So many beginnings, middles and ends. And only so many times that with a renewed chuckle at the French film director Jean-Luc Godard's famous response, as opposed to he responded famously. David's here, I'm going to enjoy that. Anyway, you know, and you do that sometimes with writing the Beatles book. I played McCartney singing. I saw her standing there where he goes 1, 2, 3, 4. I started off. That was it. Any time, day or night, on the iPod. Start off music, and then the stand down music at the end. The end. The chord. Then I can go and wash the cats. Have my 4th glass of wine. Broadbent drunk. Never mind. Okay. Monsieur Godard. I love this with Carrier. Monsieur Godard. Surely you believe that all stories, all films should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mais oui, naturellement. But not necessarily, as you English say, in that order. Yeah, it's funny, you're a hard audience. There was a woman there that said, oh, I've heard that before. And so stories provoke our memory and give us the framework for much of our understanding. They also reflect the brain works. This is the hard center of this candy now coming up. While so many people think of or dismiss stories as being inconsequential, and think of all the people who are going to talk about at work this week. What did you do last week? I went to a writers' conference. Oh, bloody hell, fine, yeah. I mean, it happens out there. They may be impressed or depressed that they didn't have the wit to come. As those experts to be found between the pages of books or who reside in fabled Google land. I've used that gag before, but it's a good enough one. Reference, we perceive and remember something based on how it fits with other things. And that was said by a psychologist called Pamela Rutledge, who lives down in LA, friend of a friend. I was taking notes. When you're describing things in a story, you are creating visual imagery that engages you in multiple ways. The brain does not distinguish between a lived image and an imagined one. You're bringing your own stuff to the story, which is reinforced through the emotions associated with the experience. Did you know that's what you were doing when you put your fingers on the keyboard and you ask somebody to read what it is you've written? It's a meeting of minds and souls and hearts, which would go to explain why the first rule of telling stories is to give the audience, whether it's one person or many, an emotional experience. David and Cara, certainly Tim Mulaney said it so much better than I do, but anyway. an emotional experience. Which reminds me of the first rule of advertising. I've already told you I was in advertising many years. And the first rule of advertising is that there are no rules in advertising. The second rule of advertising is that there are exceptions to the first rule of advertising. Or as somebody once said, welcome to the pleasure dome of creativity, Mad Max rules. Which means if it works, it works. Don't ever let anybody take you off your track, push you into something else. Your voice is unique. Your heart, your soul, your experience is unique. You're bringing your own stuff to the story, which is reinforced through the emotions associated with the experience. That's what you do as a reader. You read it through your filter. Oh, the filter of you. Welcome to you. I was telling somebody about that. There's the English comedian, Spike Milligan. Lovely man. I met him once, knew his son. I knew Peter Sellers' son. Taught them for a time. And Milligan would always carry a pocket mirror. And if he was in a bank and somebody said, can you identify yourself? He'd pull it and go, yes, that's me. Silly. Try it sometime. When you're writing. You know, I'm lost. No, I'm not. What do I do now? Oh, really? Okay. It doesn't matter. Anything that gets you going. Even if it's just you'll never forget Spike Milligan. Yeah, that's me. Which is why the heart is always the first target, telling purposeful stories. Stories must give listeners an emotional experience if they are to ignite a response. Did I write that? Even perhaps a call to act. Yes, I did, because that's the credo of advertising. Whatever I write, or once wrote as a copywriter, was to get you to go, oh, I must have that. I'll use that shampoo to wash the cat with. I must rush out and get 3 bottles now. This is the thing about the great bloggers out there and the people writing this. If you put it, saves headaches 3 ways, 15 ways you can wash the cat, 22 ways you can wash your neighbor's cat. You know, if they put numbers there, you go, it can't be that hard if there are only so many numbers. Let me see. I want 4, please. My wife's going. The psychic lever that opens. Psychic lever? Did I? Okay. No, I must have nicked that from somebody. The psychic lever that opens the brain to the power of stories is the ability to form mental representation. I didn't write that. I must have stolen that. Did I really write that? It is wired into the brain's. No, I certainly didn't write this. It is wired into the brain's prefrontal cortex. Mental representation. I can't even say it.
Is that water or gin?
The old grey goose. Okay. This is important, and this is why I copied this. No, sorry. This is why I stole this. It's a mistake. A purposeful mistake. Mental representations allow us to simulate events. Got very close to saying stimulate there. Mental representations allow us to simulate events, to enjoy experiences of others, and to learn from them. This is the bit I've underlined. Look, see? Underline. Good use. Without having to endure all experiences ourselves. Wow. Is that what you do when you write on bits of paper or type on your iPads, your Airbooks? And then you have to print the bloody things out. Many times, your reader will read what you've written and can be moved by what it is you've written, sometimes to change their entire view of life without having to endure the experiences themselves. The brain may be pre-wired for stories, but you still have to turn them on. Most compelling stories have a sympathetic hero, and they are shaped by 3 critical elements. I stole this from Tim Mulaney. A challenge, a struggle, and a resolution. Done 3 times, you've got a 3-act play. Whether it's film, novel, or film. Even the word novel, do you know where that comes from? England. 18th century. Do you know why? It was new. Do you know it was selling well before a novel? Church sermons. Oh, lovely, I love the sermon, yes. Number 44 especially. Thou hast committed. And then somebody had an idea, a novel idea. Oh, a novel idea. That's where the word novel came from. Have you got the new novel? You think I'm joking, don't you? No. Read Colin Wilson, one of the great British philosophers, whose first book he wrote when he was 19, 20. He slept rough on Hampstead Heath and every day went to the reading room at the British Museum and read more things than I've done in my life, and then wrote this extraordinary book called The Outsider, which is a synthesis of most Western thought. Extraordinarily perceptive. And he was lionized, and then he wrote a second book, and they excoriated him, and they cut him to pieces. He has a book called The Murder History of Mankind. Brilliant. So a big tome, huge, wonderful concept. That the idea that murder, crime, changes about every 10 years, because as society, Western society evolves, certain kinds of crime only then become prevalent. Wonderful. The Criminal History of Mankind. I wonder if they have it here. Michael Connolly, when I saw him speak here 10 years ago, he said, and I wrote this down, stole this from him, the appeal of crime stories is that chaos can be resolved by the time you've finished the book. It may not be resolved the way you want it, but you go into darkness, into chaos, and into mayhem for things to be resolved at the end. That's what you go to a film for. You want to have your emotions titillated and excited, and everything to be resolved at the end. And if it's not, you get really pissed off. You go, well, that wasn't a good film. That didn't resolve nicely. We're all Roger Ebert in our mind, but that's what you try and get in your book. And that's what Lee Child, brilliant. You go with Jack Reacher into darkness, and you know, hey. Do you know that's why his character was called, Lee Child's about 6'7". Lovely man. One of the princes of the industry. Just brilliant. So helpful, so generous. And he's an Englishman too. He was in like a Safeway with his wife, and an old lady came up and said, "Excuse me, will you reach that down from up there, please?" And he did, and his wife said, "That's the name of your character, Jack Reacher." Oh, wow. I love those stories. I didn't make it up. That's true. I got that. Oh, never mind. Oh, another Lee Child story. Have you got the medicine, love? Another Lee Child. I was here my first time. Cara's about 4 or 5 books in, just round the corner there. There she was, Juliet Greco, dark from head to foot, dark eyeliner, the whole business, shameless. And then she said, "I love your work." Or jamais le whatever work is in French.
You said you weren't going to bring that up.
I know. No. And Lee went, just, when a beautiful woman does that, you went, "Okay, it's nothing. Let's go and have a coffee." So I thought, I'm going to try that. I won't tell you what Lee said when I said, "I love your work." Don't ever do that with David Corbett. You won't believe it. He will. He'll slap you on the back and love you as he pushes you to the floor. Only to pick you up again. I don't know. Have you got the tablets?
Big bottle.
Okay. Michael Connolly on the appeal of mystery stories. Page 7. I better get a move on. Okay. Oh, this is Pamela Rutledge again, because I couldn't say there's a huge cognitive comfort just in knowing you're on a story arc. But it's good, isn't it? Professor of Media Studies at UCLA. We can tolerate the anxiety of the challenge because we know there will be resolution. Couldn't have said it better myself, so I'm not going to say it any. As another psychologist, he's bringing another one on. This guy called Jerome Bruner. Jerome Bruner. Or Bruner Jerome, I don't know. As another psychologist, Jermaine Brunner famously said, I'm having fun. Stories are about the vicissitudes. That's the kind of word David would write. Stories about the vicissitudes of human intention. Trouble is what drives the drama. The satisfactory resolution that drives all else is hope for the future, even perhaps your success. The brain most easily remembers beginnings and endings, which is why at school those periods are about 40-45 minutes. That's been one of the pedagogical frameworks of teaching in certainly Western culture for 50, 60 years, 40 minutes. The kids can't take anything else in after that. Remember that when you're writing. When you think, no, I'm writing, this is my magnum opus. No, I can't do the garden, I can't wash the cat, I'm writing. No, hey, give it up and go for a walk. Or as Christine says, yeah, time for your tablet. Oh, never mind, but I digress. God, if you can play hell for me when we get in the car. Stories not only move us, is that the same page? They motivate us because we see in them echoes of possibility for ourselves. This is a bit, stories are not optional, they are essential. Storytelling is embedded in the brain itself. Now there's this wonderful guy out of UC Santa Barbara called Michael Gazzaniga, and there are books of his here. But what struck me when I've been reading his books now for 10 or 12 years, is that you think you are your body, your mind, and everything else, but all the things that process everything, he calls them what does he call them? Processors. It's like circuits. He says that rather than millions of highly specialized local process circuits for vision, sensory data, motor control, specific emotions, cognitive representations, but they're distributed through the brain, carrying out the neural processes. Why did I write this rubbish? Carrying out the neural processes of experience. But this is the bit. The mind-brain segments ongoing activity into meaningful events. In other words, it's the brain that demands you have a story. If there are 3 disparate events, you will concoct a story. You are hardwired to tell stories. We are hardwired to respond to stories. Lovely question. How is it then that they function as an integrated whole and we experience all these disparate processes in the way that we do? And that we call it us? And this is why Gazzaniga, I think, is wonderful, because he's replied, because we tell ourselves stories. Religion is which story you want to have faith in. The family, the tribe, is which stories are you brought up in. How many people, how many times have you heard it that you have to be taught how to hate? That great American musical, South Pacific, you've got to be taught how to hate. It shocked America. They loved the song, I'm gonna watch that man right out of my head, all of that. I can't do it. Valley High, you know. Good God, does any of you ever seen South Pacific? Oh, I did. It's wonderful. And that's why you'll find it referenced in my book. Oh, I tell you what came out at the same time as South Pacific, Lawrence of Arabia. See? But what is that? Anyway, that's it. Extraordinary. Extraordinary. And I'm glad to see that it's being done more and more in the great symphony orchestras around the country as a special piece where people come out and actually enact it. It's great. Listen, the great songwriters can move you as much, teach you as much. Stephen Sondheim, good God. I don't know whether you like Sweeney Todd. I can't see that play often enough. It just stuns me every time. Even Into the Woods. And if you haven't seen Bernadette Peters play the witch, Meryl Streep, yield to no man. My admiration for craft, a skill, and a genius. But for me, Bernadette Peters will always be the witch. You're the witch. No, I'm the witch. You're the wife. I love her. Anyway, never mind. Because we tell ourselves stories. Every time you go home and you switch on Netflix, you want another story. Every time you go through Netflix, say, I want a better story than that. Every time you switch on the news, you want a story. Is it going to be somebody who lies to you as well, or is it going to be somebody that is now considered the kind of person that should tell you the story that they're reading off a prompter? you want a story? Not if the sponsors don't want you to hear that story, but if you want another story, you go to Fox. No, you don't in our house.
That's definitely fiction.
It's absolutely. Well, there's a Julian. Here's one of the books that blew my mind, literally and figuratively: The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. Wonderful book. Doctors dealing with split brain patients suddenly began to understand that where we believe is narrative is in the left brain. Mozart once said that all his work came to him fully formed. All he was doing was writing it down. And it's as if one part, the right part of the brain, was just literally walking across the corpus callosum to the left side and saying, hey, Mozart, do this. You know, even McCartney, how he does it, I don't know, but it's there, fully formed. We literally create ourselves through narrative. Narrative is more than a literary device, it's a brain device. Small wonder then that stories can be so powerful. I'm going to get rid of all this now. When we read a story and really understand it, we create a mental simulation of the events described by the story. That's why we're moved by it, can be changed by it. Think about that. Everything that you know to be true, and the hundreds and thousands of hours and millions of dollars that have been confirmed by years and years of research, and you know it intuitively and instinctively every time you pick up a pen to write on a pad of paper or you put your fingers on that keyboard. You'll never get anywhere with that guitar, John. But believing that he could and persevering despite all the odds and the naysayers, he did. And so can you. And honest to God, this is, if nothing else comes from this conference, if you go home and you find that you've left your notebook in the coffee bar and the coffee bar's burned down, and you go, well, I paid all that money, spent all that time, what's happening? It's already at home, it's in you, it's already working. That lovely alchemical influence of yes you can, yes I will, is working inside you. If a tree falls in the forest and no one sees it or hears it, did it really happen? If a story is told and no one reads it or hears it, was it ever really a story? I say in the end, even if it is only you that reads it or hears it, then it is story enough. The telling is the all. The fact that you've written something and you tell yourself that story. How many times have you heard, I've got to hear what I say to know what it is I know? Even, listen, you can hire our cats. Tell your story to our cats. Buy a stuffed cat, buy a picture of a cat, but tell your story. If only a part of a story is told and the only person to read it or hear it is your teacher, then it exists in the realm of story. And as Hemingway himself might have said, and I'm not going to do an American accent, you could kill me. I might. I wrote what is true, and because I did that, it is good. Yeah. Yeah. If you wrote what is true to you, and you speak it aloud, even to a damn cat or a tree in the forest, or to your teacher, as I once did, then it is indeed good, and it is a story, and you're on the road. You can and always should, and you must do no less. You can, you know, yes you can. You should carry on with your writing, you know, that was very good. Marilyn Wallace was my teacher, and she still is. And thank you for helping me to remember her all over again. And thank you for listening to my story.